Hey everyone, Ekundayo here, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're embarking on a journey that is absolutely going to shatter your understanding of solitude, biology, and honestly, the human spirit. I want you to imagine, just for a second, living your entire life absolutely convinced that you are completely alone in your struggles, believing that a unique physical burden you carry makes you an outcast, only to discover you've been carrying a profound, almost unimaginable secret your entire life. Today, we're looking at the story of Rohan, a man whose life forces us to question the very fabric of identity itself.
It's a pretty staggering question, right? So let's dive right into this. To truly understand the gravity of this story, we really have to step into the worn shoes of Rohan. He was a simple, hard-working farmer from the lively city of Nagpur, India. He was a guy deeply connected to the soil, living a life that was supposed to be as ordinary and predictable as the changing of the seasons. But Rohan was carrying something, literally, that would turn his quiet, pastoral life into a medical marvel that would eventually echo through the hallowed halls of hospitals worldwide.
All right, so let's start with Section 1, The Weight of Whispers, a childhood marked by isolation.
You see, long before the frantic hospital lights and the gasps of seasoned surgeons, Rohan was just this young, dreamy-eyed kid born into a farming family. His one real distinguishing feature? A slightly bulging belly. At first, it was an odd but entirely harmless trait. His family just viewed it as a soft curve, adding a little character to his otherwise lean build. As he grew up, he sought refuge in his sanctuary, the steady rhythm of the farm. He found real comfort in the smell of fresh earth, the crackle of the ripe crops, and the gentle sway of the fields. But outside that safe haven lay the absolute cruelty of his community. As his stomach expanded disproportionately to his slender frame, those subtle whispers grew. He was slapped with incredibly cruel nicknames like Fat Pig and Pregnant Lady. Adults would stare with this morbid discomfort, and kids would snicker. The very society that should have nurtured him essentially forced him to retreat into his shell, tainting his childhood dreams with the constant dread of sharp taunts.
And over the years, this physical trait only escalated. In his childhood, like we said, it was just a harmless bulge that never really stopped him from playing. But moving into his youth, the expansion accelerated. And naturally, so did those relentless whispers. But when Rohan hit his 30s, things got real. This odd physical quirk transformed into an oppressive, terrifying burden. His stomach started expanding at a deeply alarming rate. He actually described it as this unseen force actively pushing against his skin. The body that had faithfully helped him till the land for decades was suddenly working against him, leaving him literally struggling for breath after the slightest bit of exertion.
Which brings us to Section 2, The Breaking Point, when the body forces you to seek help.
Now, Rohan was deeply ingrained in that hardy farming mindset where doctors were seen as a resource only for the weak. Despite constant fatigue and this aching discomfort, he stubbornly refused to seek help. He was determined to just push through it, That is, until a strenuous afternoon in the fields, when a sharp, absolutely crippling pain in his stomach literally brought him to his knees, gasping for air. His stubbornness was finally broken by sheer, undeniable physical crisis. Rushed to the hospital, doctors took one look and immediately ordered comprehensive blood tests and x-rays. Seeing the utter urgency of his scans, they initiated a frantic rush straight to the operating room. Talk about whiplash, from the quiet fields to the frantic pace of a hospital in just a matter of hours.
Just put yourself in his shoes and imagine hearing these words from a doctor. Upon examination of your ultrasound, we've identified something. We don't know what it is, but we need to operate immediately. No way, right? As Rohan signed that consent form, he was just caught in a total maelstrom of fear and anxiety. Lying there on a cold surgical bed, surrounded by bustling, efficient nurses, he coped the only way he knew how. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts meander right back to his sanctuary, the soothing rhythm of his pastoral life, the fresh earth, the swaying crops, just as the anesthesia finally took over. Moving right along to Section 3, An Astonishing Medical Discovery, The Truth Hidden Within.
So as Rohan slept, the surgical team began the procedure. They fully expected to find a massive, unruly tumor. Actually, scratch that, maybe a rogue organ. They were prepared for a traditional medical crisis. They were absolutely not prepared for what actually lay beneath the surface. This cannot be. The surgeon literally froze mid-movement, his instruments clutched tightly in his hand. Pure disbelief was etched across his face, his voice barely rising above the persistent, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitors. In an operating room usually defined by composed professionalism, a massive wave of pure, unadulterated shock just swept over the entire medical team.
Okay, so what did they find? Well, it's medically known as twin absorption, or fetus and fetu. It is an incredibly rare biological phenomenon where, during the very early stages of pregnancy, one twin actually absorbs the other. Sometimes this even leads to the surviving twin bearing two sets of DNA. So what those surgeons were looking at wasn't a disease, it definitely wasn't a curse. It was a deeply fascinating, intimate biological occurrence.
Securely nestled within Rohan was a fully formed human shape. It was his dormant and undeveloped twin. That unseen force pushing against his skin for all those years, the agonizing weight that made him a social outcast, it was his brother. This tiny form had found its way into the very core of Rohan's existence. He had literally never been alone. He had been carrying his own twin for over 3 decades.
Let's look at Section 4, a harmonious duality, waking up to a new reality.
When Rohan finally came to his senses in the recovery room, the hushed whispers of the medical staff must have felt like a completely bizarre dream. His brain had to struggle so hard just to grasp the sheer enormity of this revelation. But as he recovered and eventually returned home, the contours of his familiar farm looked completely different to him. The horizon felt broader, carrying this strange sense of an untold story. The initial shock and disbelief he felt in that hospital bed slowly melted away and was replaced by an enduring, beautiful sense of unity. He realized he had evolved. He was no longer a lonely outcast. He was a harmonious duality. He was Rohan, and his silent twin, a unique amalgamation of life's unpredictable mystery. He actually found peace in a connection closer than anyone could ever imagine.
And finally, we arrive at Section 5, the true nature of empathy, a community's sudden shift.
As Rohan's extraordinary tale rippled across medical journals and the hollowed hallways of hospitals everywhere, he was suddenly thrust into the limelight. He returned to Nagpur, not just as a humble farmer, but as a living, breathing medical marvel. Now remember how his neighbors treated him before the surgery? They were tormentors who whispered derogatory nicknames and mocked his unprecedented belly with morbid fascination. But after? Oh, suddenly they became sympathizers. They offered these bittersweet apologies, marveled at his survival story, and hailed him as a complete marvel. The very belly that was a source of cruel mockery literally became a symbol of reverence overnight. It was a distinctly bittersweet homecoming that forced Rohan to look deeply at the people around him and question the authenticity of their sudden change of heart.
So, what does this all mean? It brings us to a final, pretty profound thought. What does it actually say about the true nature of empathy when we only extend sympathy to a marvel but offer cruelty to someone who is simply different? Rohan's emotional journey from a mocked outcast to a harmonious duality teaches us so much about the resilience of the human spirit. But his community's reaction, that leaves us with a stark challenge. How often do we unfairly judge the unseen burdens of others? Rohan found deep peace with the twin he carried inside, but perhaps the real lesson for the rest of us is learning to offer grace to the strangers we walk beside every single day. Think about that the next time you see someone carrying a weight you don't quite understand. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I'll catch you next time.